Right, on to business. Some people asked me what I think the perfect sense of humour in a Sonic game would be. Now, while I personally prefer unintentional craziness as we saw in games like Shadow and Sonic and the Black Knight, but as for a Sonic game with more straight humour,
I think Sonic Riders actually has the best humor normal people can enjoy.
oh, I remember that game. Lots of crazy face expressions, slapstick, silliness. I like Jet a lot in that game, having a goofy laugh, dreaming about treasure.
Passion! Not obsession like Amy Vector. Passion! There's a lot of energy and jokes from his interest in money, but he has a personality beyond that. He doesn't just yell and fight about money. He plans, he dreams, he does things around it.
Jet himself is usually laid back with his sidekicks doing most of the slapstick stuff, so the few times he does go crazy about his passion is more endearing, more sympathetic. It's his joy that's the joke, not a full-on obsession itself. Therefore, we as an audience root for him. Besides that, I also love the joke where Wave is complaining at Jet but Jet is bored, and her rant becomes all sped up while everyone ignores her.
Some you understand, but you...
Surreal and crazy humor. However, notice that immediately after the joke, Wave gets fed up with being ignored and Earth takes action by her own. See? Despite the joke coming close to character-breaking humor, they immediately fix it by giving her a character moment. Perfect balance between silly internet humor and TV-style humor.
Good stuff. So yeah, Sonic Riders is, as far as comedy goes at least, our pick for the Sonic game that does its best for a general audience.
As for the worst comedy Sonic game, yeah, Colors. Surprise. However, a lot of people complain that I ran too much about Sonic Colors, and yeah, we talked a lot about that game, so whatever. Let's find something else to talk about and leave Colors alone.
Hey guys, did you hear about Sonic Lost World?
Yes!
I hear the writers of Sonic Colors have returned once again.
What? F it! Let's talk about Sonic Colors now!
Chapter 13, The Science of Comedy Part 2. The Graf and Pontac Show.
The following dissection episode contains copious amounts of nerdy nitpicking on every single joke in Sonic Colors, supposedly for scientific purposes. If you enjoyed the comedy in Sonic Colors and would like to continue to enjoy this game's story in a pure and uncorrupted way, turn away now.
One thing you may notice when you look at the credits for Sonic games is that almost every Sonic game was written by a new writer. In fact, most writers don't have any writing experience. They're usually the art director or some programmer or something that suddenly gets handed the keys to telling the new story. There doesn't seem to be a main writing team. Closest we ever got is one Mr. Shiro Mikawa, ooh, I hope I got that name right, who wrote the scenario of 3 Sonic games, Adventure 2, Heroes, and 06. But apparently now we do have a main writing team. Our good friends Warren Graf and Ken Pontac wrote Sonic Colors, Generations, and if I may believe the latest rumours, they're back for the next big Sonic game.
And the good news is, they fixed a lot of things we talked about before. Sonic and Tails have good interaction together in Sonic Colors. They're actually pals, have some quiet moments. Hey, I like that. About time those best pals actually act like pals.
Indeed. So with a better setup and a stronger emotional foundation, the jokes can only get better now, right?
Nope. We're comedy scientists, amateur guillotologists, as you will. Usually I don't get angry by a bad joke, just fascinated, like a car mechanic finding a weird new flaw. I want to dissect the humor and see what's wrong, what worked, what its intent was. That's what we're gonna do.
Now, I know it's always dangerous to criticize others' jokes when you're in the same business yourself. I have a sarcastic snarl myself where something like a sitcom makes fun of newspaper comics for being unfunny. Ha!
So if you find that Roger makes the same mistakes we'll be preaching about here, feel free to confront him about it.
Hey!
Indeed. Well, enough introductions. Let's get down to business. Now, most jokes of Sonic Colors revolve around the translation machine, so let's start with translation jokes. Last time we talked about how comedy can be divided in neutral and dark comedy. However, just like you can divide people by their colour of their eyes, race and fashion sense, comedy also has much more different subcategories. For example, there's surreal humour and realistic humour. For some jokes you could be surreal and do crazy things, like the audience is a spectator observing madness. Other humour needs to be based on reality, where the audience imagines itself to be in the situation with the characters. Translation jokes is a realism joke. We laugh at translation problems because it's about how language works. the way humans' brains work, the way how changing one small word can change a meaning of a sentence, that sort of thing. Jokes about language need to be grounded in reality. You need to be able to see how and where the mistakes come from.
Time for an example. Here's a typical example of English from our Japanese friends. A sign saying slippery, please to fall carefully. We vaguely understand what they mean. Slippery, please be careful not to fall. But because of a poor grasp on grammar, we get something else. Now notice this is more than just a funny thing. There are actually a lot of small things going on at once. A good joke has layers. Let's take a look at every joke, every layer this sign has to offer. First, we laugh at the surprise that the sign says something weird, so we are in a quirky mood. Then we get a sense of superiority that we spotted a mistake that the creator of the sign did not. Then, we appreciate the irony that the sign doesn't just say something wrong, it ends up saying the exact opposite of what it was supposed to say. You can appreciate that in any of the millions of ways that could have spelled the sign wrong, they just happen to have the one that gets the message completely wrong. Then there's the contradiction of fall carefully. Falling is something that happens when you lose control. Doing something carefully is about being in control. So it's a contradiction. This in turn would make us visually imagine how falling carefully would look like, which is a strange and surreal idea, so there's an imaginary sense of slapstick going on. Then perhaps we even imagine the reaction people will get when they find the sign, and imagine how the owner of the sign would react if he or she discovers the meaning of the sign. So there's a bit of schadenfreude.
So instead of just a funny thing, there's actually several funny thoughts going on in your mind at once, all of a different genre of comedy even. There's a sense of superiority, a pun, sense of irony, slapstick, something for everyone. That's why translation jokes are funny and reach a wide audience.
Important to note here is that all of those small things are connected to each other, each working on top of the others. So if one of them fails, the whole structure falls apart. For example, let's say the sign has a bit added, like, sorry, we meant don't fall. This in turn changes the situation from a crazy mistranslation to just a simple mistake. My sense of superiority is gone, my mindset and mood is different, and all the other jokes lose their power. The card house collapses. Now, let's take a look at Sonic Colors.
He says his name is Talks a Lot, and he's from a faraway soda, and where flowers water them with dances. Okay, he said his name is Yacker. He's from a race of beings called wisps.
For a language joke to work, we need to see the connection from the intent to the flawed sentence. So, Yacker from a different planet of wisps turns into Talks a Lot from a soda that waters plants. The only thing that makes sense is Yacker turning to Talks a Lot, because yakking indeed means mindlessly babbling. However, for the rest, it's pure random. The dances that waters plants doesn't even have a equivalent in the correct translation.
Yes, so instead of being amused how language can twist and turn translations, the joke is more of a surreal bit of randomness now. Haha, random words! But that's not a problem, is it? A bit more juvenile but kid-friendly. I thought you liked random jokes.
No, randomness by itself is not funny. Finding secret patterns within the randomness is. And this is not just one joke, eh? It happens practically in every cutscene.
They're saying it was either ice cream or a tractor beam.
Yeah, well, I'm going to guess it wasn't ice cream shooting out of those generators.
It's the structure, the backbone of the story and the comedy of Sonic Colors. So if these translation jokes were set up like a proper one, with the random words just being part of the bigger comedy structure, both kids and adults could have enjoyed it. But here the structure falls apart. And also Sonic and Tails explain the joke, which is the same as in having the sign in front of our example, so the structure is even more ruined. I don't appreciate the complexity of language since these random words are obviously scripted. There's no sense of a proper mistake, no sense of how language works. The whole structure doesn't work anymore. Instead of a vast solid comedy setup to create a strong series of jokes, all we get are random jokes that are only funny for the really easily amused.
Well, as you said with the sign, I can imagine the ice cream beam really shooting ice cream. So there's the slapstick.
Yeah, true. I suppose it does have layers. It doesn't work for me because Sonic and Tails explain it. Just implying the visuals or really have them happen would have been stronger than... Imagine how funny the joke is that we just made, kids.
Well, it is for kids, and the writers probably assumed that explaining the joke will help them understand.
Well, thank God they wrote jokes and didn't program the game, or the game would probably have gone entirely on autopilot too, I assume. Because it's for kids. It would have been cool if like, after Tails' translation machine got it wrong a couple times and Sonic and Tails laugh, that later on in the game, one of those mistranslations suddenly end up being true. That Eggman actually does have an ice cream beam. It's sugar making Sonic sticky and unable to move. Then it'd be a throwback, a comedy twist, a defining moment for Eggman, self-realization for Sonic and Tails, and proper slapstick. Things! Layers! But instead it's just, ice cream. It's funny because it's random. Ugh. Another thing that bothers me. Okay, so Sonic Colors is written like a comedy, right? A wacky comedy. Let's have fun with these characters. But all their parodies, all their jabs, are so weak. Eggman having an ice cream beam? Oh, that is so weird. He would never do that. Hello, this is Eggman. This is the guy that attacks Sonic with a slot machine that includes an option to punch himself. This is the guy that has a whack-a-mole game with Sonic to open doors. This is a guy that makes floating balloons his main transportation in his base. And that happens in the serious games. So if you're gonna go for the wacky parody route, you need to go beyond. But instead, Eggman just does generic mundane things he always does. But now all of a sudden this is crazy and wacky. Ooh, Eggman made a theme park, isn't that wacky? No, he done that before. That's what he always does. So it doesn't have the balls, the power to be a parody. It's just random.
I don't mind randomness jokes. They're cute. What I can't stand is how the writers are so proud of their jokes they keep going on about it.
Baldy Nosehair was using burps to do it.
He is pretty gassy. Maybe the smell would knock him out? I don't know, something doesn't seem right with that.
That's what I said. It made no sense.
Can't just make a joke and move on. They have to have the others have a wacky face expression. They have to put sound effects. They have to have a character explain in full detail that a translation mistake has taken place, and why the mistake is wrong, and how wacky it is.
Sonic Colors is written in a realistic sense, as in the humor. The atmosphere of the jokes is that Sonic and Tails are buddies and joking around. So we as an audience are essentially a third friend in their group, joking around like how a group of friends would. Therefore, the jokes require to stem from reality. They need to react to things that could happen to actual friends on an adventure, and react like actual friends would. The audience being able to project themselves into the situation is key with this type of humor. And you, Roger, you're more of a fan of surreal humor. Watch from a detached distance and look at madness unfold. That doesn't quite work here.
Yeah, but if my friends make a bad joke, that's it. They make the joke, I politely nod at them, and we move on to talk about something else. But Sonic Colors just keeps adding sound effects, and it keeps still explaining what joke just happened.
To me, it's the equivalent of a comedian going, "Did you get it? Did you get it? Did ya? Did ya? Did you get it? Did you get my joke? Did you get it? Why are you not laughing? Why are you not laughing? Did you get my joke?"
Yeah, why would they do that?
A similar thing happens in television sitcoms. In sitcoms, they add a laugh track and include pauses after each joke. This is because on TV, audiences don't really pay attention. They turn on the TV while they talk about their day, read the newspaper, or doze off and fall asleep. The writers, especially Ken Pontac, comes from a television background, so he must be familiar with this strategy.
This is a video game. I'm not reading a newspaper while I'm playing a video game. I pay attention. And if I wasn't paying attention to the cutscene, I'd press start and skip it. If there's one medium where you have your audience utmost attention, it's a video game.
Also, keep in mind, Sonic is a game for kids.
What?
Sonic is for kids. Or just...
Okay, let's talk about this. Okay, first of all, here's a photo of Summer of Sonic, a convention where Sonic fans all over the world celebrate Sonic. Counting vast amount of children here. But let's ignore that. Let's ignore the fact that Sonic has been slowly evolving over the years. And even if Shadow and Sonic 06 were a bit too dark, going all the way back to even beyond Sonic 1 is a bit extreme. I mean, Harry Potter also started as a kid's book and evolved to a slightly more dark adventure. Sonic Adventure was okay, right? Sonic Riders? Even the original games, which were neutral. Not for kids. Neutral. An adult playing Sonic 1 doesn't cringe or facepalm. It's neutral. But no, we're so scared of Sonic 06 that we apparently ran straight into preschool level of story. But hey, I'm gonna ignore that too. Let's say that, yes, every single person that enjoys a Sonic game is indeed the brainless toddler who drown in his own drool whenever they're forced to actually think about what they're seeing on TV, straight out of a 1950 soccer mom's wet dreams, and everyone enjoying a Sonic game is all like,
"Gee willikers, this Sonic game sure is swell. I just wish there was less excitement to distract me from all those old still family morals I could be learning."
even in that case, I still think Warren Graff and Ken Pontac failed to write properly. I mean, let's talk about a kid for a moment. Let's just take a look at children now. Children. I mean, let's look at children's psychology.
Right. The thing about children love discovering things, right? Kids love pirates. They love discovering hidden treasures. Why is Harry Potter popular? Well, there's a castle filled with secret rooms and hidden passages hidden away. Dora the Explorer, an explorer. She even constantly asks the children for their opinion. Why do you think teachers always ask children questions? Today we're going to talk about France children. Any of you ever been to France? Any of you got anything to say? Why would she do that? No way a kid can talk about anything more educational than the teacher would. Because it encourages them to think, them to discover. the kids to express their joy in sharing their own discoveries.
Of course, and Pokemon. The joy of discovering hidden Pokemon. In a world too complicated for kids to understand, filled with adults that always know everything better, Pokemon is the ultimate children's dream. A universe for themselves to explore, discover things in. The joy of being at the playground and shouting at your friends that you discovered a brand new Pokemon nobody else did.
Exactly.
Yes, I see what you mean. The brain rewards itself for discovering new things. It finds joy in discovering, understanding new things. That's how you become smarter.
Right, because of evolution. You know what evolution is, right? That Charles Darwin travels around in his TARDIS and murders every human being that doesn't uphold to his idea of how a human being should be.
That's not quite how it...
But learning is more than classrooms. In fact, I think most children learn things from playing and doing things they enjoy, not proper schooling. Which brings us back to Sonic Colors. Sonic Colors doesn't let us discover. The story is told to us by Pontac and Graf literally writing the story on a sledgehammer and repeatedly crushing our skull with that sledgehammer. They keep hammering it in.
One of the important ingredients for comedy is discovering the punchline, the twist. A joke sets up a story and then suddenly the twist sends the story in a new direction. By constantly explaining the punchline, the joy out of discovering the punchline is gone.
Yeah, but if my friends make a bad joke, that's it. They make the joke, I politely nod at them, and we move on to talk about something else. Sonic Colors just keeps adding sound effects, and it keeps still explaining what joke just happened. I constantly get kids sending me comments explaining my jokes in my own movies. Wow, Roger, Knuckles sure is mean in this animation. Why, yes, he is, little Tommy. Well spotted. And why would that? Does his behavior in the animation remind me of any others in the actual game? What makes it unpleasant? How should they behave? Think. Discover. Evolve your worldview. What's the fun in just Knuckles is an idiot, laugh at him. Eggman always loses, laugh at him.
Well, the game is for kids, and they may not understand the joke otherwise.
So what? Let the kids be confused. That's good. Being confused means they're thinking, trying to understand, interacting, paying attention. And if the jokes had layers to them, they write simple jokes for kids and add additional elements for the thinking crowd. But instead it's in the middle, boring for kids and dumb for smarter people.
This is something I noticed about Pontac and Graf's writing style. Before diving back into colours, I did some research and looked for other projects they wrote for. For example, Pontac and Graf wrote an episode of Transformers Rescue Bots as well. Now, that show is a kids show, so I knew this wouldn't be Optimus Prime kicking ass and such, but a simple kid story. Sure, whatever, but the jokes! Look at the jokes!
Hey, Frankie! Shh! Sorry, Mrs. Niederlander. He doesn't run a very friendly bed and breakfast.
Ah, I see. A lady acts angry and then the boy comments on that. That's the kind of jokes they do. Something slightly out of the ordinary happens and then a different character will comment on it. Sonic Colors says this all the time.
Are you talking to the broken robot who can't hear you?
Such a dull and obvious way of making character jokes.
In a parody movie like Airplane or Naked Gun, this is how a joke works. The writers of those movies watch the kind of movies they want to make fun of. They notice a cliche, a thing that always happens. There's always a guy so stressed out by the situation that he picks up his smoking habits again. Then they exaggerate that. In this movie, the guy is so stressed that he starts smoking, drinking, sniffing glue, and being completely unhinged from the situation. Now here's how your brain works when you watch that joke. First, something surreal, something slapsticky will happen. The crazy visual, the strange thing happening will trigger your brain to laugh. However, your brain is almost immediately trying to figure out what's happening, because the joke is based on an actual observation from a movie trope. Your brain will discover that connection. As a result, first you laugh, because something crazy happens. Then your brain discovers the connection, which the brain rewards itself by making you feel good, so your enjoyment of the joke gets a boost. Then, after laughing, you're left with the observation the joke is based on, the movie cliche they made fun of. So an intellectual afterthought.
Right. Now, Ken Pontac and Warren Graf's jokes are often parodies as well. Another example, outside of Sonic Colors. In another Sega game they wrote for, Mad World, there's a joke.
It's an extra life for Jackie. I wonder why those other guys didn't grab that extra life. Yeah, it's almost as if they didn't see it. Same with the happy onions and power-ups. It's like only Jack can see that.
Yeah, that always happens in fighting games.
Right, so it's a parody joke. Or is it? The problem is, instead of using this observation to make it into a joke, to turn it into a situation where something weird, something surreal happens, they just say it. They literally just say their observation. In Mad World's defense, they only wrote to commentators, so they didn't have the room to do much more with it. It is the first time I noticed a style of humor from them though, and later when they do have full control of the story, their jokes are still naked observations. That's one of the many things I hate about their writing style. There's no flair, no sense of discovery, no color. They just say their punchline, you know? They just grumpy and laugh. Sonic talks to a broken robot. Laugh. They just hand out their punchline without setup or proper build-up or payoff. If you mock something, if you parody something, the joy for the audience comes from discovering why the crazy things happen. If you just say the punchlines, it would be like reading a TV tropes page. Interesting, amusing, but not really a joke.
Weren't you just complaining that the characters react to bad jokes? Adding sound effects and such? There's your flair.
Flare up to the punchline, not to rub it in after. They're like the most dull and soulless newspaper strips ever, except to even the worst Garfield and Family Circus strips credit. At least they don't end every joke with...
Another thing I notice is how all characters seem a bit out of character.
Well, it is quite difficult for a writer to jump into an existing series, of course. After all, the writer needs to understand how the characters work from a neutral perspective, from the original writer's intention, from what the audience thinks about them, and have an opinion of their own, and find a perfect balance in all of that. Hard to keep track of that.
True, very true. Last time, people were angry at me that I had a fair character study of Amy, while I was different about Charming and Shadow. And that made me think about why. And I realized, when I talked about Amy, I was talking about her as a character, as my pure interpretation of her character, where my study of Shadow and Charmy last chapter were more based on the audience perception of them, rather than them as characters themselves. It's tough as a writer sometimes to keep those perspectives in mind. So yeah, it's easy to confuse the actual substance of a character with your personal parody interpretation, or with how an audience experiences the character. It's a mistake I can relate to, alas.
Yes, so there's this rule for writers, that you should always write the characters based on yourself. After all, if you write a character based on a stereotype, it'll be two-dimensional. But if you apply your own thoughts, imagine how you would react in those situations, the character becomes more three-dimensional. So this advice is solid, to a certain extent. If you go too far into this, you end up writing all characters literally as yourself.
Oh god, that explains why all literature books I had to read for high school were about an unlikable and sexually frustrated creep.
Some writers I know have a tendency to write all characters like themselves. Joss Whedon to a small extent, Seth MacFarlane to a bigger extent. Now sometimes this works to their advantage. So yes, in Family Guy, every character is essentially Seth MacFarlane with a slightly different flavor. But there it works. Seth has a unique personality, and his shows become a nerd fantasy, a what if the entire world would run on Seth MacFarlane logic. The fact that even babies and dogs operate on Seth MacFarlane logic adds to the joke. So there's appeal.
So what you're hinting at, you're saying that all characters and colors are written as how Pontek and Graf themselves.
Well, as I said before, the general mood, the style of writing, is that the story's about a bunch of friends hanging out, chatting, sharing jokes, and having an adventure. So it works on a relatable level.
Makes sense Pontak and Graf would write Sonic and Tails like how they would react as jokes and such.
But there's a few problems with that here. Unlike Family Guy, this is a straight adventure, so having characters joke all the time can be grating when the story picks up.
When I feel the ground shaking under my feet and see plumes of dust rising and rubble tumbling and aliens running for their lives, yeah, I get a bad feeling. So, how about you and me make like Eggman's hairline and recede?
A quick little joke or a one-liner would be acceptable, but a full-on stand-up comedian routine? It's like they're ashamed of their own story, that Pontek and Graf feel uncomfortable around the material, so they feel the need to underscore literally everything that happens. Oh, a talking hedgehog and a scientist. There's no way anyone can take this lame nonsense seriously.
I don't really agree. I don't sense that. You may be looking too far into this. Anyway, the thing that bothers me about the writers writing all characters like themselves is that everyone acts the same. Sonic is the witty, self-aware Joker. Tails is the witty, self-aware Joker. Eggman is the witty, self-aware Joker. The robots are witty, self-aware Jokers. They're all the same. Granted, each one of them is in a different flavor. Sonic is the bro, the jock. Eggman is more dark and the only one going with the theme park theme. Tails is more detached and cynical. But that's just the flavors of the same type of character. Just different flavors of ice cream when the story should have contained a balanced 3-course meal.
Well, I like that kind of character. Jack Sparrow, Tony Stark, Ash Williams. Gotta love our one-liner spouting jerks.
But the reason those characters work is because they're interacting with different people. Jack Sparrow is funny when he tricks dumb soldiers. Ash Williams is funny when he jokes at villagers or mindless monsters. A Bugs Bunny needs his Elmer Fudd, the stupid idiot, to fall for his traps. It's like a clown throwing a pie. You need the other clown to get hit by the pie. In Sonic Colors, everyone is a smartass. Everyone's a clown throwing pies, but nobody ever gets hit by the pies. When Sonic has a quip about Eggman always losing, it has no impact, because Eggman himself made that joke already a couple scenes ago.
Hey, you know that old show everyone always compares Sonic Colors with? In that show, yeah, Sonic is a smartass, but Tails isn't. He's just an assistant or a spectator. The robot lackeys aren't smart, they're mostly overconfident. Robotnik isn't smart, he's vain. Difference in personalities creates jokes and dynamics. But everyone in Colors is on the same level. Everyone is essentially Graf and Pontak. So whenever someone makes a joke, instead of a comedy payoff, you essentially trigger a 5-hour discussion where all characters act clever around this joke. Eggman is the only character who's in character and is amusing, and everyone else just sounds like a writer, constantly breaking the fourth wall, constantly being aware of story conventions, and everyone is constantly smart. All of them constantly acting smart around each other is just grating.
But I like it when there's more smartasses up against each other. Jack Sparrow and Barbossa together, Sherlock Holmes interacting with Moriarty. They're both smart and funny.
Well, yes, but that's not really played for straight laughs. Sparrow and Barbossa interacting, especially in the first movie, is played for drama, tension, the two chess masters up against each other. There's more going on than just them mocking each other. It's like a duel of the brains. That's not really the case with Sonic and Eggman.
Indeed. Well, let's take a break from discussing colors for now. There's a lot more to explore for next time. Anyway, Dissected has a Facebook page now, a central place to get discussions about Sonic going. It's got 19 followers already, so it's big and amazing. It's the Facebook event of the century, or something. I don't know, I never really use Facebook. There are some other articles about Sonic linked there as well. Well, to be continued.